Sagittarius. Someone is very sick. Karma showed no mercy. Dear Sagittarius, you didn't arrive here out of curiosity. Something deep within you stirred, an unspoken knowing, and it led you to this message. Not to relive the past, but to finally understand what your soul has sensed for some time now. Someone who once hurt you is falling apart. Not just physically, but spiritually, emotionally, karmically. And yet, this moment is not about them. It's about you. You have carried compassion like a second skin. You've forgiven without apology, healed without being asked, and stood quietly in your strength while others failed to see the magnitude of your love. But now the wheel has turned. Not in vengeance, not in spite, but in truth. The universe is moving, not to punish but to restore balance. And that balance begins with your release. You are not here to rescue them. You are not being called back into the story you've outgrown. The pain that once wrapped itself around your heart no longer belongs to you. What you are feeling now is not a burden, it is a signal, a shift, a reminder from your higher self that says, you have walked far enough. Over the course of this journey, you will pass through 4 sacred gates. Each one will return a part of yourself you once gave away. Each one will peel back the silence and the sacrifice. And each one will show you that the ache you've been feeling was never yours to keep. This is not the return of an old chapter. This is the moment you begin writing your own. Shall we begin? Gate 1. The collapse you were never meant to catch. Sagittarius, you are beginning to feel the tremors of something you cannot yet name. There is someone in your life, perhaps from the distant past, perhaps closer than you want to admit, whose world is quietly unraveling. You have not spoken in a long time. Maybe they disappeared without a goodbye. Maybe they stayed but hollowed you out little by little. Maybe they were never gone at all, just absent in all the ways that mattered. And now, without warning, their life is breaking down. Their body might be showing signs of decline, but their soul has been unwell for much longer. And deep inside, your spirit knows, because you once held them in your heart as if their healing was your responsibility. But not anymore. This is not about revenge. This is not about wishing harm. In truth, you once prayed that they would find peace, even if it was without you. You once lit candles not for justice but for mercy. You asked the universe to heal them, even when your own healing was incomplete. But now the universe answers not with reunion, but with clarity. The suffering you feel in the air is not yours to carry. It is the karmic echo of someone who once held your love in their hands and chose to ignore its worth. And now they are learning that love, when abused, becomes absence. When rejected, becomes silence. When dishonored, becomes consequence. You've spent a lifetime thinking that love means endurance. That if you hold on long enough, remain kind enough, forgive deep enough, you will finally be seen. And yet, Sagittarius, the one thing you forgot was this. Being seen should not cost you your soul. There was a time you gave everything, your time, your trust, your tenderness, to someone who only knew how to receive, never to return. You mistook their silence for sadness, their distance for depth. You thought that if you just held space long enough, they would meet you there. But space is not the same as connection. Waiting is not the same as being held. The signs were always there. The way your joy dimmed in their presence. The way your winds felt quieter, your voice softer, your intuition less certain. You used to speak your truth and then backpedal, wondering if you were being too much. You used to feel proud and then question if it made you arrogant. You began censoring your own light so they would feel less threatened. And even in those moments, you never stopped offering love. Even in their coldest silence, you gave warmth. But here is the truth that your soul is now ready to hear. Love that costs you your wholeness is not love. It is dependency disguised as devotion. It is emotional theft masked as connection. And now, as they begin to unravel, you are not being called to save them. You are being called to remember yourself. There is a kind of sickness that no doctor can diagnose. It is the sickness of the spirit, the erosion of truth ignored for too long. This person, whoever they are, is experiencing that erosion. Their choices have caught up with them. The story they told themselves about who they were is collapsing. And they are scared. Not because of illness but because the mask is slipping. And behind it they see something hollow. Something they once used your love to cover up. They will not tell you this, not directly. They may not even realize they are sick in this way. But your intuition knows. It has always known. Long before you had the words to describe what was wrong, Your energy shifted around them. You began to feel small, drained, responsible for emotions that weren't yours. You learned to brace yourself for their moods, to soften your brilliance so they wouldn't feel inferior. And now, without your light nearby, they are confronting a darkness they can no longer outsource. Sagittarius, you are not heartless for staying away. You are not cruel for choosing peace. This is not a failure of empathy. This is the beginning of a boundary, and it is sacred. For too long, the world has taught you that strength looks like sacrifice, that being good means being available, that love is measured by how much pain you're willing to tolerate. But the truth is this: love is not measured by your suffering. Love is measured by how deeply you are willing to honor your own soul. You do not need to return to the place that broke you just because someone else finally feels the fracture. You do not need to explain why you're no longer reachable. Your silence is not a punishment. It is a form of healing. It is the pause your spirit needed to catch its breath after years of hypervigilance. After years of waiting to be chosen by someone who never even looked at you clearly. They are sick, yes, but you are not their medicine. You were never meant to be their cure. You were meant to love, yes, but not to lose yourself in the process. You were meant to forgive, yes, but not to forget that you too deserve gentleness. You were meant to stay open, yes, but not to allow every wound to bleed through you. This is the moment you begin to reclaim what was taken without consent. This is the moment you stop watering the dead garden of a relationship that never bore fruit. This is the moment you realize, if they had truly valued you, you would not be standing on the outside now. And even if they never say it, even if the apology never comes, even if the truth remains unsaid, you are free. They are facing the consequence of the energy they once gave to the world. And you, Sagittarius, are facing the reward of the integrity you never abandoned, even when it hurt. So when your chest tightens and you feel that ache that says, something is wrong, don't confuse it for a calling. It's not an invitation to re-enter. It's a confirmation that you've exited for good. You did not fail them. You simply refused to fail yourself again. And that is what real healing looks like. Gate 2, the mirror that no longer breaks you. Sagittarius, you used to believe that love meant sacrifice. That if you gave enough, waited long enough, softened your voice enough, then the person who kept hurting you would finally see your worth. You thought healing meant holding space for others, even when they had no intention of stepping into it with you. But now something has changed. You no longer flinch when their name is mentioned. You no longer shrink at the memory of how they treated your light as something inconvenient. And what you feel now isn't anger. It's clarity. They are not well. Not just in body but in soul. You sense it, not with facts, but with the quiet certainty of your spirit. Once you would have rushed back at the first sign of their pain. You would have lit candles, whispered prayers, written long messages trying to reach their heart. But now, you are still. Not out of indifference but out of knowing. Knowing that their journey is no longer your responsibility. This is not a punishment from the universe. It's a return. A return of everything they once poured into the world, including what they once poured into you. The careless words. The cold silences. The way they looked at your love as if it were something to endure, rather than treasure. And now their life is unraveling. And you, Sagittarius, are witnessing it not as their savior, but as the one who finally stepped away. They might say they're lost, that they didn't know what they had, that they were just hurting. But pain is never an excuse for cruelty. And silence, when used as a weapon, becomes a form of abandonment. You gave them so many chances to soften, to grow, to see you clearly. And each time, they chose the comfort of control over the vulnerability of true connection. There was a time when you mistook their distance for depth. When you thought if you loved them better, more purely, they'd stop pulling away. But the truth was simpler and harder. They didn't want to face the mirror your love held up to them. Because your light revealed everything they were not yet ready to heal. And now that mirror has cracked. Not because you threw it at them, but because you finally took it back. You once thought you had to stay silent so they wouldn't feel small. You believed that if you held space for their wounds, they might eventually hold space for yours. But what happened instead? You disappeared. Not in body but in essence. Your needs went quiet. Your laughter dulled. You learned to anticipate their moods before you even opened your mouth. And slowly you stopped recognizing yourself. That's the cost of loving someone who isn't ready. And now they feel the absence of your energy like hunger, not because they've changed but because they've lost the thing they once took for granted. But Sagittarius, you are no longer here to soothe someone else's karma. You are not a balm for wounds that refuse to close. You are not a second chance waiting in the wings. You are the result of every boundary you were brave enough to set, every goodbye you whispered through tears, every time you chose to walk away even when your whole body wanted to stay. This is your sacred return, not to them but to yourself. They may say you gave up, but you know better. You stayed far longer than anyone else would have. You forgave things no one ever knew about. You kept loving through betrayal, through absence, through indifference. You held the door open so long your arms went numb. But no more. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you finally realized they never did. Now the universe is rearranging itself around your truth. The same truth you used to bury beneath their needs. The same truth you used to deny for the sake of harmony. And in this new alignment you see it clearly. The pain they're feeling isn't yours to carry. It never was. You were not placed in their life to save them. You were a gift they were never ready to receive. And now the consequence of that rejection isn't your guilt. It's their awakening. Whether they take it or not is no longer your concern. Some souls only awaken through collapse. Some only realize what love means after it's gone. But by then, Sagittarius, you will already be light years ahead. Not out of spite, but because you were never meant to wait forever. This gate, this second doorway, is where you stop apologizing for choosing yourself. It's where you stop wondering if they ever think about you. Because you know they do. But their reflection is not your compass anymore. Let them sit in the silence they once forced you into. Let them taste the distance they created. Let them unravel. You do not have to fix it. You do not have to respond. The healing they now seek must come from within, not from you. And if guilt still lingers in your chest, breathe it out. You did everything you could, more than you should have. And now your job is to live. You are not cruel. You are not heartless. You are simply done. Done carrying people who had the strength to hurt you, but never the strength to hold you. Done explaining your feelings to someone who always made you feel too much. Done performing wellness while you were breaking inside. Done shrinking just to keep the peace. So now you rise. You rise not in anger but in wisdom. Not in bitterness but in truth. You rise because you remember who you were before they forgot your worth. This mirror, it doesn't break you anymore. It reflects someone who made it out. Someone who came home to their own light. Someone who doesn't rescue anymore because they have finally been rescued by themselves. And that, Sagittarius, is your freedom. Gate 3, the return of the archer's flame. Sagittarius, you were never meant to live a life half-lit. And yet, for so long, your fire dimmed to accommodate others. You softened your brightness, convinced that if you glowed too fiercely, they would leave. But they left anyway, not because you burned too brightly, but because they feared their own reflection in the truth you carried. You didn't scare them with your warmth. You frightened them with your honesty. This gate is not about what they did to you. It is about what you forgot about yourself. You forgot that you are ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, vision, and sacred freedom. You forgot that your essence is not meant to be tamed. Your truth not meant to be silenced. You forgot that your path is wide and wild and lit by a divine fire no one else is meant to control. You once believed that if you loved them hard enough, stayed long enough, they'd finally understand your heart. But love that must prove itself is not love, it's a negotiation. And you were never born to negotiate your worth. So let's go back. Not to the pain but to the light before it. The version of you who sang loudly, laughed without checking the room. The version of you who believed in miracles. That version is not gone. They are just behind the veil of what you endured. And this gate, it tears down that veil. You are not here to be small. You are here to burn. And I don't mean destructively. I mean radiantly. You are a walking constellation. You are the flame that does not ask permission to shine. And they were never prepared for that. They mistook your fire for something to tame, to manage, to use when it suited them. But fire is not furniture. Fire is not a pet. Fire is a force. And you are sacred fire. They called you too intense. But intensity is what forges truth. They called you too much. But your too much is what melts illusions. They asked you to be quieter, smaller, more agreeable, But you weren't born to be agreeable. You were born to speak truth even when your voice trembles. And now that you no longer do it for their validation, your power returns. This gate is the return of the archer, the soul that always knew where to aim, but spent too long pointing their love at people who were never standing still. You sent your arrows into the future, hoping they'd be caught by someone capable of growing. But those arrows landed in hands that didn't want to hold anything they couldn't control. And so they dropped your love on the ground and walked away. But you didn't stay there. You didn't lie in the ashes. You rose, not in vengeance but in sacred clarity. You see now that your silence was never weakness. It was strength. You see now that your absence is louder than your presence ever was. And they don't know how to fill the space you used to inhabit, because there is no substitute for truth. And you were truth wrapped in flame. They may be watching now, from a distance. They may wonder how you are still alive, still radiant, still growing. But they didn't see the nights you barely held yourself together. They didn't hear the prayers whispered into pillows. They didn't watch you stitch your soul back into wholeness with threads made of your own light. You broke, but you broke open. And that is what saved you. They cannot take from you what you no longer give. You don't send your energy backwards anymore. You've learned that some people come into your life not to love you, but to teach you how deeply you can love yourself when no one else is watching. You gave them grace. You gave them silence. But now you give yourself permission. Permission to laugh without caution, to cry without shame, to grow without apology. You no longer carry their lessons. You carry your liberation. This flame, this light, it was never meant to be dimmed. It was meant to lead. And now you are the flame bearer, not for others but for yourself. You no longer burn out to keep someone else warm. You no longer set yourself on fire to light someone else's path. Because your light is not disposable. It is divine. So when they remember you, and they will, it won't be through guilt. It will be through awe. Because you didn't return. You ascended. Gate 3 is the place where you stop trying to be understood by those who never even saw you. It is the moment you stop crafting your voice into something palatable. It is where you take your power back, not with fury, but with unwavering truth. You are not angry. You are aware. And that awareness has changed everything. Now you walk differently. You speak differently. You say no without explanation. You rest without guilt. You shine without asking for permission. And when people see that light, they will either rise with you or fall away. And both outcomes are blessings. You are the fire they could not hold. You are the truth they could not carry. You are the love they never learned to receive. But now none of that matters. Because now it is not about them. It's about you. You, Sagittarius, whose soul wandered through pain and found wisdom. You who stopped asking why and began asking how. How can I honor the version of me that endured? How can I live in a way that no longer apologizes for my brightness? You who now knows that peace does not arrive when others finally treat you right. Peace begins the moment you stop giving them the power to define you. This is the return of the archer's flame. Aim it forward. Let it light your way. And never again dim it for someone who is afraid to walk beside your truth. Gate 4. The kingdom you never knew you were building. Sagittarius, this is not the ending. This is the arrival. For all the years you gave, the words you swallowed, the laughter you dimmed. This gate is where you reclaim not just what was taken, but what you were always destined for. You thought you were surviving heartbreak, but what you were really doing was building a kingdom. Not with bricks or walls, but with boundaries, with truth, with light carved from pain. Every time they overlooked your love, you laid a stone. Every time you walked away instead of begging to stay, you laid another. You didn't know it then. You only knew you were tired. But now, standing at the top of this mountain of endurance, you see the shape of what you've created. A sanctuary built entirely by your refusal to give up on your own soul. This kingdom doesn't scream, "Look what I've built." It whispers, "I never stopped believing I was worthy of more." And that whisper, Sagittarius, is more powerful than any apology that never came. You no longer seek applause. You no longer need anyone to witness your blooming. Because now, you are the witness. You see yourself clearly, not as someone who was abandoned, but as someone who chose themselves when no one else did. You see that what you mistook for rejection was really protection. That what you thought was punishment was preparation. You see that you were never being buried, you were being rooted. This kingdom wasn't built to impress anyone. It was built to hold you, to honor you, to protect the fire they once tried to smother. And now that fire burns freely, not to destroy but to warm, to light the way for the new version of you who does not negotiate her worth to be included. You are not asking to be let in anymore. You are asking yourself, who deserves access to this light? And the answer is clear. Only those who see your soul without needing you to shrink it. Sagittarius, this kingdom is not built on bitterness. It is built on balance. The scales have returned to center. You do not wish anyone harm. You simply no longer offer yourself as the healer to those who refuse to heal themselves. They may come back. They may not. But either way, your doors do not swing open just because they knock. Because now you know. Access to your energy is earned, not owed. You are not closed off. You are guarded by grace. You are not hardened. You are discerning. And this discernment? It is not a wall. It is a gate that opens only for those who bring peace, not chaos. The most sacred part of this kingdom isn't the freedom you feel. It's the peace you no longer have to fight for. The silence that no longer hurts. The solitude that no longer feels like punishment but like power. Here you are not overwhelmed by absence. You are anchored in presence. Here you are not haunted by what could have been. You are grateful for what no longer is. Here you do not carry the weight of proving your value. You simply live it. With every choice, every breath, every boundary, you do not have to make anyone see it, because the right ones already do. And the wrong ones, they are not your work anymore. Sagittarius, you are ruled by Jupiter, planet of expansion. And now you understand, expansion does not mean making room for what drains you. Expansion means outgrowing the versions of yourself that needed to be chosen to feel worthy. You choose you now. You rest when you're tired. You leave when your soul feels tight. You speak even when your voice shakes. And when people say you've changed, you smile. Because that's the point. You are not the version of you who stayed silent just to keep the peace. You are not the version of you who shrank herself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You are not the version of you who questioned your intuition just because someone didn't like what it revealed. You are not waiting anymore. You are walking. Head high, shoulders soft, heart still open but no longer unguarded. There are no loud triumphs here. No dramatic declarations. Just a quiet revolution happening within you. The kind of shift that doesn't need to be posted, just lived. Fully. Authentically. Radiantly. And when you look around, you see, everything you ever needed was never out there. It was always in you. You were the one who chose to heal when it would have been easier to harden. You were the one who kept believing even when you had every reason to stop. You were the one who broke but chose not to break others. And now that light, the one they once tried to take from you, it's burning like never before. Not for them, not to prove anything, but for you. For the version of you who waited so long to come home. This kingdom is yours, Sagittarius. Not because anyone gave it to you, but because you built it from every lesson, every tear, every truth you refused to abandon. You no longer carry the past on your back. You carry the future in your chest. And it is bright, because you are no longer who they remember. You are who you were always meant to be. Conclusion, the light that was always yours. Sagittarius, you have walked through every gate, not as a wanderer lost in search of meaning, but as a soul slowly remembering its own light. What was once pain is now wisdom. What once broke you now forms the foundation beneath your feet. You have not just survived, you have transformed. This was never about them. It was never truly about the ones who left, who couldn't love you, who didn't see your worth. This journey, from the first ache to the final breath of release, has always been about you. About the parts of your soul you had to meet again. About the power you reclaimed by choosing to let go. About the peace you rediscovered when you stopped searching for it in someone else's apology. You did not need justice from them. You needed truth from within. And you found it. You do not need to be understood. You need only to be whole. You do not need to return to what hurt you. You need only to stay rooted in what heals you. You are not the fixer, not the rescuer, not the keeper of someone else's karma. You are the light. And from this moment forward, may you never again question the value of your radiance. May you never again dull your fire for a room that cannot hold it. May you walk not in fear but in freedom, because you've earned it. Quietly, sacredly, without anyone watching, you've crossed the threshold. The old story no longer fits. The past no longer speaks. And what waits for you now is not a test, but a homecoming. This is the life that belongs to you. The one where you no longer carry the weight, but wear the crown of your own healing. The arrows you once bent in protection now point forward. Go there. The light is already waiting.